Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we will look at finding a percentage of a quantity. We're going to look at finding things like 10% of 120. So remember from previous lessons, percentages are just decimals and fractions. You can write a percentage as a decimal or a fraction. So that's our first step there. We convert the percentage to a fraction or a decimal. Remember that of means times. We were doing things like 3/5 of 20 means 3/5 times 20. So to find a percent of a quantity, just convert this to a fraction or decimal, convert this to a times. So 10% of 120, well 10% is 10 over 100 or 1/10. You can also write it as 0.1, it doesn't matter. So 10 over 100 times 120 is just 1/10 of 120. You can do some cancelling here. You can divide by 10, and then the 10s cancel out. Either way you do it, you're just left with an answer here of 12. 10% of a quantity is just 1/10 of it, and 1/10 of 120 is 12. So we can use that same process on all of these, but if you can find 10% of a quantity, that can help find other percentages. See, 10% of 120 is 12. So that means 5% of 120 would be half of that, 6, because 5% is half of 10%. So 15% of 120 is 10% plus 5%. 15% of 120 is 12 plus 6, which equals 18. Note, we could have got this answer by writing 15%, which is 3 over 20, times 120, and then done some cancelling. 20 goes into itself once, goes into 126 times. Either way is fine. It doesn't matter which way you do it. But just note that it might be a bit of a shortcut. If you can find 10% of a number, you can use that to find other quantities. So if 10% of 120 is 12, what would 90% be? Well, 100% of any number is itself. 100% of 120 is 120. It just means the whole thing. So 90% is 100% minus 10%. 120 minus 12. So 90% of 120 will be 108. So again, we could have got that by going 90 over 100 times 120, but this way might be faster. So what about 25% of 120? Remember, 25% is 25 over 100 or a quarter. So whenever you see 25%, it means a quarter. So we're finding a quarter of 120, 120 divided by 4. Well, 12 divided 4 is 3, so 120 divided by 4 is 30. So a quarter of 120, that's what 25% means, is 30. So we can use this to find 125% of 120. So when you're finding more than 100%, our answer is going to be more than the original. It's going to be more than 120. So 100% is 120, 25% is 30. Let's just add those together. 100% plus 25%. So 125% of 120 is 150. What about 75%? Well, 25% is 1 quarter, 75% is 3 quarters. So we could just go 3 times 30, which is 90. That's 3 quarters of 120. So how do we find 1% of 120? Well, we can use our rule. We can go 1 over 100 times 120. But it might be easier to do it this way. So if 10% of 120 is 12, this is 1/10 of that. So 1% is 1/10 of this, or 12 divided by 10, which hopefully you know is 1.2. When you're dividing by 10, you just take the decimal point and you move it 1 spot to the left. So 1% of 120 is 1.2. So what would 0.5% of 120 be? Well, 0.5% is just half of 1%. So it'll just be half of this. And half of 1.2 is 0.6. So what would be 99.5% of 120? So that is a pretty difficult question. We could do 99.5 over 100 times 120, but that's really difficult. We can find another way. 99.5%. Well, if we know 10%, we can find 1%. By dividing 10, we can find 0.5% by dividing by 2. So if this here, 0.6, is 0.5%, 99.5% will just be 100% minus 0.5%. So it'll be 120 minus 0.6. And that gives us 119.4. So once again, the sort of proper way to do it is we could convert the percentage to a fraction or decimal and then multiply. We could have done that for any of these, but a shortcut way, sometimes you can find 10% of a number and that will allow you to find other percentages of a number. Also remember, 25% is a quarter. If you can find 25% of a number, you can use that to find other quantities. All right, let's now look at a worded problem. So a trip from Canberra to Brisbane is about 1,300 kilometres. If I've completed 2% of the journey, how far have I travelled? This is asking us to find 2% of 1,300 kilometres. So what we could do, we could just convert this to a fraction, 2 over 100, and then times by 1,300. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Of course, we need to cancel. So 100 goes into itself once, goes into 1,300 13 times. You get 2 by 13, which is 26. Nothing wrong with doing that. Another way you could do it, we could find 10% of 1,300. So just divide it by 10, that's 130. Then 1% will just be that divided by 10, which is 13. If 1% is equal to 13, 2% is just 13 times 2, which is 26. So either way you do it, we get 26 kilometres. All right, let's look at this question in black, which is harder. In a class of students, 40% play soccer. If 10 students play soccer, how many students are in the class? So we have to note here, this one's different to this. We're not being asked to find 40% of 10. We're saying there's some number of students in the class. When we take 40% of that number of students, we get 10. Here we're asked to find the original amount. So we're saying which number, when you take 40% of it, gives 10. So when you're finding the original amount, you have to do the opposite. Rather than timesing, we're going to divide. So instead of timesing 10 by 40 over 100, it's 10 divide 40 over 100. But to make it easier on ourselves, we might like to simplify this fraction. So 40% and 40 over 100 are both equal to 2/5. So we can do 10 divided by 2/5. So remember, to divide fractions, you flip the second fraction, make it a times. If you have a whole number, write it over 1. So this is 50 divided by 2, which gives us 25. Another way you might like to do it, if 40% of the number is equal to 10, then that means 10% of the number will be 10 divided by 4, which is 2.5. So 100% of the number will be 2.5 times 10, which is 25. Either way you do it is fine. Just remember, make sure when you're reading a worded question, are you being asked to find a percent of a quantity like normal, like we were here, or are you being asked to find what is the original number that had a percentage applied to it? We do those differently. One involves multiplying, one involves dividing. All right, thank you so much for tuning into this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.